Welcome to my third video in the How to Knit tutorial series. In the first video, we learned how to hold your yarn for American or Continental style knitting. In the second video, we learned how to do the knit stitch in both American and Continental style. And now you're ready to do the purl stitch. Whether you knit American or Continental, I cover that in this video. Now, once you know how to do both knit and purl, you know pretty much the majority of what you need to know to knit just about anything, because every other stitch is a variation of either knit or purl. Actually, the entire tutorial series is on my website at www.talinawinters.com/how-to-knit. It goes through every step you need to know for how to knit from the very beginning to a finished product. I also designed a pattern to go with the tutorial series called the Building Blocks Cowl/Hood. It's a unisex design that uses the very basic stitches that we've learned in these three video lessons, knit and purl. So when you knit both ways, which you do for the first part, you create garter stitch. When you knit one direction and then purl on the way back, on the outside it creates this look here. That's called stockinette stitch. On the reverse side, it creates this really densely ridged section here. That's called reverse stockinette. And those are both very lovely stitch patterns that can be used in a lot of things just on their own. So, are you ready to get started on how to purl? Let's go. Purl stitch is just the opposite of knit stitch. Knit stitch, if you were looking at the right side of a knit stitch, creates these little nested V's, assuming you were knitting all on one way, purling the other. If you were knitting every row, it's going to create nested V's alternated with the back side of the knit stitch, which is these, what we call the purl bumps. However, if you're knitting all one way and purling the other way, your knit side is going to look like all the nested V's, and your purl side is going to be all the bumps. You can see it a little bit easier down here in this section where I had a whole bunch of stockinette. This would be the reverse stockinette side. We call that knit one way, purl the other stockinette. This would be the knit side of the stockinette stitch. Okay, so up here in this section, I'm working the stockinette stitch again, and I'm on the purl row. If I'm knitting Continental, I'm going to have my yarn wrapped around my left hand. I'm going to keep the yarn in front for purl stitch, and I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to go into my first stitch on the left, from the right to the left, through the front leg. Then I'm going to take my working yarn and I'm going to put it down between the two needles from the right to the left, not this way, okay, from the top right down to the bottom left. And I'm going to come through the stitch to make a new loop on my right needle and pull it off the left needle. And again, keeping the yarn in front, from the right to the left, into the left stitch, putting the working yarn down from the top right to the bottom left between the two needles, pulling it back through the loop to make a new loop on the right needle, and pulling the old stitch off the left needle. If you're knitting knitting English style, you're holding your yarn in your right hand, but again, your working yarn stays in the front. For purl, yarn is always in front. You put your needle in from the right to the left into your stitch. Then you need to take your working yarn from the top right down to the bottom left between the two needles, pull it nice and tight so it stays there, pull it back through the left stitch to make a new loop on the right and pull it off. And again, in from the right to the left, moving your yarn between the two needles from the top right to the bottom left, and in between, back through the loop to make a new loop on the right, and there we go. You've just purled 2 stitches. Thank you for joining me for my How to Knit video series. I hope you now feel confident to go out there and start knitting in either American or Continental style, and to start tackling projects. However, you've just gotten started. There's so much more to knitting. That's the beauty of it. It can be learned very easily, but there's always something new to challenge you. So on my website, I have the full How to Knit tutorial series. It takes you from knowing absolutely nothing, but goes through all the steps you need to learn how to knit, from choosing your needles, choosing your yarn, reading patterns. I also have a section on my website dedicated to reading your knitting, so that when you're looking at it, you can say, am I looking at a purl or a knit stitch? I don't know what I'm supposed to do next. Well, once you learn how to read your knitting, you will. It also tells you how to catch wrong stitches, among many other things. So I recommend you go check that out at www.talinawinters.com/how-to-knit. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me through my website at www.talinawinters.com. I also have a knitting newsletter that I send out a few times a year with knitting news, tips, and when I release new designs. So if you want to sign up for that, head over to my website and click on contact, and you can sign up for my newsletter. And I look forward to seeing your projects out there in the world. Happy knitting!